What is going on, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel where it's that time of the week again. Yeah, it's about 5 o'clock-ish New Zealand time. It's time for a stream to have a look at Super Rugby this weekend. We've got another 4 matches coming your way, and as always, if you're watching this later on in the video form, you can come and tune in and join us at about this time, 5 o'clock or so New Zealand time, each and every week on a Thursday afternoon or evening, depending where you come from as to what you call it. We're going to be having about the 4 games, having our thoughts, our predictions, our guesses at what is going to happen. So let's not mess around because we've got some big rugby coming in. So let's get the guest into the action. Shane, welcome back yet again, my friend. How are you doing?
Good, thanks, Steve. It's a nice afternoon here in the north of New South Wales. And tomorrow, when we all get fired up after we've finished our working week for some rugby, it's just going to get even better.
It is indeed. Right, so we have 4 pretty big games coming up. What did you make of last weekend? Super Rugby Aotearoa getting into action for the first round. What did you make of that? The comparison, as it always happens between New Zealand and Australia, the 2 competitions running simultaneously now. How was your weekend of rugby watching?
Well, I didn't watch the Crusaders game.
That's a good idea.
Something else to do on Friday night. But, that's always an excuse that I have in an empty jar. Look, I was really, really pleasantly quite happy with how the Blues performed against the Hurricanes. I thought they'd played some really good rugby towards the end there and got a good margin at the end. The Brumbies, well, didn't they do it in style as well? So played some really good attacking rugby. They didn't do what Australian sides sometimes do. They go to sleep for about half an hour after half time. They just kept going on with the job. And the Mighty Reds, well, they got over the line, but gee, I've got to tell you, Steve, the Melbourne Rebels pushed them all the way and probably even deserved to get away with that one.
Yeah, that was my point I wanted to ask you about, was that game with the Reds having the bye this week. They're not in action, but I did want to ask, what do you think about that Reds game? They got away. Boy, they got away with that, didn't they? It was an amazing match. I thought the Rebels blew my expectations completely away, but do you think those more the Rebels played well, or were the Reds just completely off the boil as opposed to their opener where they were amazing and they just fell off the game?
2 things I observed. The Rebels have still got to work on their attacking rugby. They got 7 penalties. Yep. I think they kicked 7 from 10. So if they kicked all 10, they would have had 30 points with penalties. But they played some really good possession rugby. And can I say to you, I thought Matt Tamua, who I still believe is a better 12 than 10, but he played really well at 10. He deserved his Man of the Match award, which he got. The Reds were lucky. Gee, they were a little bit lackluster, and sometimes this is the thing that maybe Brad Thorne's got to work with. It's the last few years, and even before that, when Richard Graham was coaching, they'd have a good week, and then they'd be a bit patchy the next. I thought O'Connor, if he wants to get that number 10 jumper, which he is certainly aiming for the Wallabies, while he was excellent against the Waratahs, he was very patchy this time around. So the Queensland's got to stop rushing their players as well. Every time they got possession, they tried to go for the try. So you can't just have 2-3 phase plays. You've got to build it up a little bit. And I think we keep talking about the referring lessons for Australian sides, and indeed the Wallabies later on when it comes to international. These are the bugbears that really, they just can't quite get right. But overall, I thought it was a bloody good game of rugby, if I could say it that way, Steve.
For sure.
And, at the end of the day, probably a couple of points in it. What we want to see every week in Australian rugby, we want to see a couple of good derbies.
That indeed, yes, we do. I was shocked and surprised at that match, but hey, never lost faith that the Reds are going to pull that one out at the end, and I'm amazed at how they did. We'll move on, though, to this week, of course, with the Reds on the bye, I thought we'll get that into the action nice and early. But we do have 4 games that are not including, well, your Reds or your Blues, Shane. So you're not seeing either of those 2 teams in action this weekend. It does all kick off, though, on Friday night. That's tomorrow night in about, 27-ish hours, 26 or so hours time, where the Chiefs are in action for the first time, and they're taking on my boys, the Highlanders. This is going to be exciting. We're going to go through these games, so if you do have any thoughts or comments you want to say, do leave it in the chat. We can go through them if you've got any questions and that later on as well. So do get involved if you would like to. Shane, Chiefs, first game. By last weekend, they got to watch on and see how the Crusaders got the job done against the Highlanders. What are you expecting from this Chiefs team this season, and especially this weekend in their opener?
I hope a whole lot of difference. Last year, particularly when it got to the split competitions, when it got to Super Rugby Aotearoa, they were terrible. They'd made a lot of mistakes, and they weren't getting the results that they'd probably done earlier in the year, and maybe that was just the early effects of Gatlin and so forth. And he's obviously... they're still planning to have some sort of lines to it, so he'll be away with that. Well, I hope with the Chiefs that they actually build some consistent results and play the entertaining rugby we know that they can play, as well as just keeping their discipline as well. So it's... I don't know how to describe the Chiefs other than a good patchwork quilt or a bad patchwork quilt. It depends on just who's stitching it that counts, I suppose. But you know, the Chiefs really need someone like Damien McKenzie to fire on all angles. And I mean that literally, because the Chiefs went away from their typical angle line running with their forwards and back lines, their quick mobility, and they started playing Gatlin's Wales game, which is down the centre, narrow and boring. So, sorry to all Welsh rugby fans, but...
I don't think you can upset Wales at the moment. They're on too much of a high after last weekend.
You beat England, so we love you here. But Steve, it's just, you want to, after the last few years, you just see the Chiefs have a good week and a bad week, like Australian rugby. So I'll be really intrigued, and I believe at least we can all watch from our homes, because I think it's an empty shed game this week with the restrictions and all. A lot of people are saying a lot of things to their television screen.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about that before we started the stream, weren't we, Shane, about just with the situation here in New Zealand and the stages of lockdown in different parts of the countries are in. There's no real in between, is there? It's either anyone can go or no one can go, which is a bit of a shame. So it seems like that will be the case this weekend, and that is why Game 2 of Super Rugby Aotearoa has been moved from the Saturday night fixture to Sunday afternoon, because that laps over with the whole 7-day period of those different stages of lockdown changing. And so potentially, all going well, like it has been so far, there will be a full crowd, hopefully, in Wellington for... Oh, it's in Canterbury, isn't it, that game? For the matchup between the Crusaders and the Hurricanes. So we'll look at the 2 teams, and we'll get your thoughts on those from that, Shane. Starting off with the Chiefs there at home, so it is up in Hamilton. Ruben O'Neill is starting in the number 1 jumper. Samasoni Takiaho at hooker, and Sione Mafulao will complete the front row. Tupu Va'ai and Naitoa Akoi, that's hard to say together at the same time. I don't often say his first name. Semipini Funel will be at 6. That's a new name. Sam Kane, of course, at 7. And Luke Jacobson will don the number 8. Brad Weber and Brent Gatlin There you go. There's a talking point for you against his former side. Remember the team that he played for when he knocked over that winning drop goal about a year ago, as it was from now. The midfield, Anton Leonard-Brown and Sean Wainui. Tini Nano Satoro is on the left wing. Jonah Lowe, a former Hurricane, on the right. And Damien McKenzie at fullback. Yeah, he's a fullback. Thank goodness for that. They've made some common sense moves. He's not wearing 10. So a lot of former players in here. Mafaleo for one. Gatlin and Jonah Lowe all coming to the Chiefs from other franchises. A bit more experience in that side. But we'll see how they do get on in their first Chiefs appearance. Up against them, Highlanders have changed a little few subtle things, which is going to be interesting. Daniel Leonard-Brown starts with Ash Dixon and Siati Tokalahi, no change there. Josh Dixon and the Irish punching bag Jack Regan will be in the second row. Shannon Frizzell, Billy Harmon and Marino Makali to the back row, so the pack is exactly the same. Number 9, though, Aaron Smith, new contract. He's here till 2023, but he's not starting this game for the Highlanders. No, Falau Fakatava. He will start this matchup against the Chiefs. Josh Ioane, he comes back in. He's taken back his number 10 jumper of Mitch Hunt, who's moved to fullback. The midfield, Sio Tompkinson and Gani Punavai, again, staying the same. Jonah Nareki on the left wing. Connor Garden-Bishop, I thought, was outstanding for the Highlanders last week. He's on the right. So a couple of changes, well, just the two. In the halves, Fakatava in, Josh Ioane in. That could change the whole way this team plays. What do you make of those two lineups, Shane?
I'd like to have seen Smith start against Weber, a battle of two All Black number 9s for a start. I think that the Highlanders forwards react really well when Smith's out on the park, and congratulations on the new contract too, sticking around for 2023 in a Rugby World Cup year. So that's a big plus for the Highlanders. His leadership is so valuable on the park. Look, a lot of young people in that Highlanders side. Only can get better from there. Didn't have much to do with the Crusaders Highlanders game, but I do believe that they gave it an honest go last Friday night. So a lot of positives to build on that. And when you look at the Chiefs lineup, you've got Weber, you've got McKenzie, you've got Sam Cane, you've got plenty of experience there, and they're going to have to really lead that Chiefs side around the park. And make no mistake, Steve, while this game is an empty shed game with no crowd, these players will be ready to go from the kickoff. And I can honestly say to you that they will treat this as another game of rugby and even an All Black selection trial. I really am. This is the game that when I looked at my iPad this morning that I wanted to get up and watch tomorrow night. So I am thinking that this is going to be a really close one, and I will go for the Chiefs by 3. I think we're going to see a scrappy, hard forwards contest.
Oh, goodness me, the Chiefs by 3. Oh, you've thrown me off here completely. Finally, we're going to disagree on something. That's what I like to see. This game, I agree. I think it's going to be a bit of a crack of a matchup. I think you're going to see this game decided by which of these two forward packs that are not world beaters, when they're on, they're on. When they're not, they could get completely dismantled. We saw last weekend the Highlanders pack just wasn't at that international level that the Crusaders offer. Their forward pack are All Blacks. They're so good. They didn't handle that. This weekend, they've got a chance. If not, they'll give themselves, they'll probably have the upper hand in this matchup. But the Chiefs pack will certainly want to get that upper hand over them as well. So it's going to be two even packs. That's going to decide this matchup. You've got plenty of excitement in that back line for both those teams. I was really impressed with those wingers from the Highlanders. A team that's, I think, struggled with those kind of outside backs positions. Sure, players like Ben Smith and Waisaki Naholo have been there. They've been standouts, but they've never had the luxuries of really, really good ones. And I was impressed with Connor Garden-Bishop and Jonah Nareki last weekend. The midfield actually got them some ball out there. They went finding opportunities as well, so I thought they were quite decent. But the Crusaders are just that next tier up, aren't they? Just that next level of team, and it's just hard to really get anything over those boys. But they played well, they played valiantly. They've got a game in hand now. They've had that big matchup. The Chiefs they're coming off fresh. So how much that's going to play into it? Are the Highlanders going to try and wind this down and get that, first match sort of last breath in from the Chiefs? Go for the fitness sort of game. That will be interesting. But yeah, Brent Gatlin, what's he going to be like? How's this going to be? He's playing for his old man's team when his old man's not there. He's playing against his former team. It's going to be very, very, very interesting how those guys go for their new team. And when they do all play their former teams as well, it's going to be very, very interesting. I've gone opposite. I've made my picks, and I can't remember what I did pick, but I'm going the Highlanders to pull this one out, and I think I'm going to go the Highlanders by 5 mighty points. I'm going to have to check now to see if I've because I've written the preview, I've written things I want to do. I have gone Highlanders. Yeah, look at that consistency. I did put Highlanders by 5. Go me. Well done on that one. Should be a good opener though. Looking forward to it. Friday night cracker should be a good way to start off our weekend and get to see those Chiefs boys in action. And Damien McKenzie not wearing 10. That's all I want to take out of this game. Put him at fullback and watch him make an impact in this game. Right, let's move on.
And if I could say so...
Yes, go for it.
Sorry, Steve.
No, you're right, go.
And as I've always said, and not a serious point, even though this game will have no crowds, please get to your homes, turn your televisions on. The players will be ready to entertain you, the fans, as it should be, and keeping the spirit of rugby alive for that one.
Definitely. We'll move on. Game 2. Couldn't agree with you more. Watch the game. Support the team. Support the players out there. Especially the Chiefs' first game. It's going to be tough to not have that support base behind them like they would be expecting to have there at home as well, especially. Over to your side of the ditch, Shane. Waratahs, Western Force. Boy, what was it? 61 points to 10. 114 points conceded or something like that in the last 2 games. This is all about who's going to pick up victory number 1. And I tell you what, Shane, I am right behind the Western Force to go out there and pick up that W. How are you feeling about this game?
I'd love to see the Western Force really go and win too. It's a matter of we've seen a bit of action in round 1. They've spent a lot of money, which is, I like to see people spend a lot of money. The economy goes around. So some new players in that lineup. Yeah, look, to me, if they did beat the Waratahs, it's no boil over. The Waratahs really, someone like Lockie Swinton and Jack Dempsey are going to have to run karaoke nights and really put out the big hits with a supporting crowd. So, the Waratahs have got to muscle up. That was absolutely disgusting last week. And I know that they're a young side and I know that they're going to take a lot out of it. But there's still 23 players that have been picked as an elite rugby side for Super Rugby, and you've got to play a lot better than that. And so the Force, with all their signings, will look to, I think, build up their phase play some attacking footy, and see if they can pick up their first win in Super Rugby in 4 years.
Yes.
Which, ironically, their last win was against the Waratahs in their last ever game of that 18-team comp back in 2017.
I love that stat. That is the best stat I've heard today. I think, yes, Force getting the job done. It would be great to see it. But this Waratah side, they have some really, real big problems. I think, that, like you say, they've got a decent enough team on paper. They've got some good players and some high-quality players, but boy, they were just not existent last weekend against the Brumbies. Absolutely smashed them. Like you say, from whistle to whistle, it was relentless. It really was. The Brumbies absolutely destroyed them. Something we have not seen in a long, long time between teams like that, especially involving the Waratahs in recent years. Really, that's been a downward slide for them. We'll have a look at the 2 teams lining up for this matchup. Tetra Faulkner will wear 1. Dave Parecki will be at hooker. Harry Johnson Holmes completes the front row. Sam Card, Hugh Sinclair, Lachlan Swinton, Carlo Tizzano. He's fantastic. He's been my favourite player to watch from a Waratahs jersey. And Jack Dempsey complete the pack. Jack Grant will again start at 9 with Will Harrison at 10. Tipai Moroa at 12. Alex Newsom 13. On the wings is James Ram. And this is interesting here. Jack Maddox moving in from fullback, pretty much doing a swap with Mark Nwanganitawazi, who goes back to the fullback role. So a bit of a switch there, trying to get Jack Maddox clearly in the game more. Dangerous runner, but just don't see enough from at fullback. That will be interesting to see. But what have they done here? They've switched a dangerous outside back player into the line and taken one out of the line. So how that's going to affect them will be interesting to see for especially Nwanganitawazi's game as well. For the Western Force, Tom Robinson, Filiti Kaitu'u at hooker. Santiago Medrano completes the pack. Jeremy Thrush and Fergus Lee Warner. Tom Anstey and Kane Kotika in the back row with Bernard Stander, who will wear number 8. Thomas Cabelli starts at 9 and Jake McIntyre gets the nod. He has relegated in prior to the bench as well. So he starts in 10. Good off the bench, I think, in their opening season game. The midfield does worry me. Richard Kahui and Tavita Kurandrani. Superstars, no doubt, but they are raging bull superstars. And when you've got guys like Tony Pulu, Byron Ralston and Rob Carney in your back three, that does point to, a little ball for those guys to play with. And what's even more exciting, I do love the Argentinians, I really, really do. Domingo Miotti on the bench. Yes, the Jaguares' former fly half is in there in 22 as well. So that's going to be exciting because he is a talent and he is a sharpshooter as well. So I'm excited to see what he will offer this team. So, come on, Shane. I can't go past the Western Force here. That team, Jake McIntyre, really looked good off the bench, wearing 10 when he come on in that first game. I just hope we see guys like Kahui and Kurandrani passing a little bit more than we did in their season opener. How you see it?
Well, I'll go for the Force. I want to see the money, the rare time I want to see a money side beat, another money side in the Waratahs. So it's a battle of the elites. But the Western Force, they've obviously spent the money for a good reason to get these players in, to be a bit more competitive than they were last year. I am saying that it's going to be no boil over. It's going to be a Western Force win, I believe, by 7. I think the Waratahs will want to play a little bit better. They're missing Jake Gordon. They're missing Angus Bell. Simmons is gone. Hooper's gone. Foley's gone. Beale's gone. It's a lot of big rebuilding. So, just if they go out and play a little bit better than what they did against the Brumbies, they'll consider it a positive. But yeah, look, it's a Force for me by 7, mate. I think that they're gonna enjoy their first win in Super Rugby AU.
That's what I like to hear. I mean, is it possible that the Waratahs could play worse than they did last weekend? I mean, that was a pretty shambolic sort of performance, and I think they will be lifted for this because they know this is a huge game. I think you go into the game against the Brumbies and it's kind of like, well, we're going to try the best, but we're really, pushing it uphill with a fork if we're going to do anything, to upset these guys. These are front runners. I think confidence probably is something they do lack as a squad, especially after these first 2 weeks. I guess that game against the Reds, they're probably like, oh, God, this isn't good. And then they're probably lacking a bit there in mental state going into the Brumbies. And then that happened. It's like, oh, dear. I think they've got to really focus here. And they will be focused because this is a game that is a must-win. If they lose here to the Force, there's no one else you can say, oh, well, we'll just beat these guys later on in the competition. No, this is it. This is a wooden spoon battle right now, given the way that the Rebels played last weekend. This is the wooden spoon battle. Win here for these two sides is going to go pretty much 80% towards jumping off that bottom of position for the remainder of the season, barring anything drastically changing in the future weeks. But yeah, excited. I'm excited to see these guys. I love the Jaguares in the last few seasons, so I'm really excited to see these guys like Kubeli again back in Super Rugby. But you got Lozana's on the bench, Medrano starting as well, and Miotti is a really good superstar, young player. He's going to be a huge asset. Get them in the team, get them playing, get them used to it, and this is going to be a formidable side, I do think, by the end of the season. although I sound like I'm just going to be going all Western Force here, I'm only picking them to win by 3. I think it's going to be pretty close. I do think the Waratahs is going to be more up for this than they previously were in the last 2 rounds. But still, as long as it's a Force win, I don't care. Bring on the Force, win number 1 for those boys, and get that little horse rolling for them. And speaking of horses, we'll move on to game number 3. Now, we're not going back to Super Rugby Aotearoa. No, because that game has been shifted to Sunday, which means game 3 is the Rebels versus the Brumbies. One team who was impressive beyond recognition in their season opener after the bye in round 1. That's the Rebels. And another team who was just, destroying everyone who gets in their way. That is the Brumbies. It's hard to look past the Brumbies in any game now after that fantastic display. But the Rebels, you've got to give them a sniff, don't you, with the way they played against a Reds team who are a bit wasteful, but still a very, very good side.
Well, Saturday night finally is only Australia's night. And it's used to be Chook Lotto night on the show called Hey Hey It's Saturday. So do your Chook Lottos at your local pub, then come back home for the footy. The great Southern Derby on this side of the Tasman, with the 2 southernmost sides in the very successful Brumbies. And the Melbourne Rebels, who played some really good rugby last week. They were very, very unlucky and probably only a matter really of centimetres the other way, and probably they would have been celebrating a win against the Reds. Here's my issue with the Rebels. They played very well against the Brumbies. They played, against the Reds. But they played some very smart rugby, but they just got to have some attacking polish at the end to finish off some set plays and so forth. And that's why I have that concern with Tamura at 10, because he's a better running 12. But as I said, he played outstandingly and he deserved his man of the match. Because kicking penalties against the Brumbies is fruitless if the Brumbies are going to play attacking rugby like they did against the Waratahs and scoring tries. So you've got to match them for the whole 80 minutes, Steve. Like, this is an all-round side. This is McKellar's side. He got rid of 2 Wallabies in Kurandrani and Powell to look at other opportunities, but brought players in. The Brumbies have good depth in their system. The only real Australian side to have some strong depth, and it's working. And you're just seeing a side that's ready to go, rearing to go, and the Rebels are going to have to match it for 80 minutes, mate.
It's interesting, wasn't it, watching this game, the Rebels game last weekend, how they kicked all the points, all the shots at goal. The irony of watching the game earlier with the Highlanders playing the Crusaders, they turned down so many points, and then the Blues and the Hurricanes game turned down so many shots at goal going for the try, and then the Reds as well. You're turning down shots at goal to go for the tries. It was such a contrast. And then you saw the Rebels come on. It's like, why are these guys even in this matchup? Like you say, they've not looked like scoring a try all night long, yet here they are. Pretty much, they led until about the 78th minute throughout the game, just because they took the points they had on offer. You could argue back to the Highlanders, back to the Hurricanes as well. If they took more of those opportunities, maybe that could have changed their results or put them closer. And, the scoreboard pressure is what creates a lot of opportunities for teams who are trailing. If they can get closer, if they can put it up, cut those leads down, it can completely change a matchup. And I thought the Rebels, although, like you say, their attacking intent was pretty much non-existent, they got points on the board, and that is the main thing. Matt Tamura, he directed that team very, very well around the field, and I spoke about that battle between O'Connor and Tamura, and if he plays well, Tamura, that team does perform well. So much hinges on that one player. So whether they can do that again against a team like the Brumbies is going to be, the ultimate sort of test. The team for this matchup, we'll have a look through it. For the Brumbies at home, Scott Seo, Canal McInerney and Alan Aotearoa, the front row, Darcy Swain and Caden Neville in the middle of the pack with Rob Valentini and Jerome Brown at 6 and 7. And Pete Samu just about left one out at 8. Into the back line, Nick White and Noah Lolosio in the halves with R.A. Simone and Len Ikitau really an up-and-coming superstar is Aotearoa. On the wings, Mac Hansen. I paid him out last week, didn't I? Saying he's a bit of an average winger, and he goes and scores a hat-trick. There we go, the effect of this show. Andy Muirhead on the other side, and Tom Banks at fullback. Could see those guys like Banks getting in the points as well last weekend. Up against them for the Rebels, Corbus Eloff. He was amazing. He was an absolute superstar too for that pack for the Rebels side. James Hansen at hooker and Ponifa'a Masili is the front row. Ross Haylett-Petty returns and Trevor Hosea in the middle row. Josh Kemeny, I should say. Richard Hardwick and Michael Wells complete the pack. Joey Powell and Matt Tamua again in the halves with Reece Hodge and Stacey Ely in midfield. As Marika Corenbetti on the left wing. Lockie Anderson on the right, and Tom Pincus I thought was quite solid as well at fullback. For the Rebels. Interesting thing on this for both sides on the bench. Solomon Akata is there for the Brumbies. Good to see him back. And Lucio Sordoni, another Argentinian. Yes, another one in the Australian competition. He's coming off the bench as well. So, plenty of impact on there. But these two sides not changing a huge amount. Shane coming into this matchup. Where do you see the Rebels going to here? Just stick with the same sort of thing. They've kept Tumua there. They've kept, Reece Hodges at 12. Nothing's really changed on the side. They're just going to keep things as they were against the Reds. Clearly, they were pretty happy with how that match went.
Yeah, rightfully so. I just want to see them do a little bit more running. I want to see them pass the ball a little bit more. That's the only couple of things that they've probably got to work on for this week. Also, I've got to say that the Brumbies... I don't think there's too many changes from last week, actually. So
I think none.
Pretty consistent lineup. So he's really... He's got the lineup he wants, McKellar. So the pressure will be on the Rebels. Canberra, we've talked about when a Canberra crowd comes out, it's parochially behind the Brumbies. It's daunting. It's scary. It's almost as scary as a horror film. You're entering some rough territory to play rugby in Australia. Yeah, look, I don't know what... Still, the jury's out, isn't it? I mean, this is their second game. We pretty much know where the trajectory of, say, the Brumbies and the Reds may be heading. We're looking for someone that's going to finish at least third, so we know the playoff for the... But let's just see how this goes. The Rebels are known for pulling upsets against the Brumbies. They have some good form. They do play some good rugby against them. So time will tell. 80 minutes is a big deciding factor on that. I'll give you a good example, Steve. 4 years ago, the Rebels had struggled in the opening part of the season. They came against the Brumbies on a cold night in Melbourne, and I can remember how cold it was even here at Tamworth. And they pulled off an upset, 19-17. You never underestimate the Rebels because they can do that. And I remember them beating the Highlanders when they were 31-7 down.
Don't remind me.
2013. So it's the next minute sort of attitude the Rebels have got to have. They've just got to play for the 80 minutes. And if they play for the 80 minutes like they did in the Reds, be very competitive, you just never know.
Yeah, and I guess the only question I'll probably have to add on to that would be their consistency. Other teams have played a couple of games now. We can see, as you say, where they're kind of heading, and like the Waratahs consistently average over those two games. Are the Rebels going to be able to pull that sort of performance off again? Are they consistently that good, or are they going to be a bit hot and cold? Is their opponent going to dictate how they play? Are they going to be like that against the Western Force? That's the big question as the season progresses. We're going to see. This is the tough test. And just recapping on what we said earlier, there's one change. James Slipper started against the Waratahs. Scott Seo starting in 1 this week. Otherwise, the team is completely the same. Not a single slither of a difference between them. So, yeah, let's see how they go. Back it up. That's a big thing. Back up. I think they watched the Reds in round 1, I reckon, and they would have said, I thought it would have done them mentally, and they would have gone, oh, God, we've got to play that. But they stood up, and they faced up to that quite well. Can they do that again without that extra week preparation of watching the Brumbies? They were just gone off that Reds game. straight on to the Brumbies. Are they ready at that same level that they were for the Reds? Is going to be interesting. And can they upset the Brumbies the same way they did the Reds? Because the Reds, like I said earlier, they were frustrated. They wanted to score tries. They wanted to attack. Farmaseli and Taliana Tupou just wanted to smash each other like they do whenever those two guys play. So it's kind of 14 on 14 where those two guys have their own little fight in the middle of the paddock trying to smash each other. But aside from that, can they keep it up? Can they do it again? That is my question. I have gone the Brumbies by 11. What was your pick, Shane? I don't know if you said it or not.
I really enjoy these derbies. It's one of my favourite nights in the calendar that I do mark, Brumbies v Rebels. I'm going to go the Brumbies by 5. I just think that their mauling and their set piece is going to be a lot stronger. Maybe even their patience in attack too. But I do think the Rebels will continue to play pretty well out there. So I think it'll be an evenly matched game. But I think the Brumbies will just have that little bit too much.
Professionalism. Right, let's wrap it up into our final game of the weekend. It is a Sunday, and it is a 4:30 kickoff, I think, between the Crusaders and the Hurricanes. Boy, Shane, how good were the Crusaders? How clinical and efficient were they against those Highlanders? The game was fairly tight. It was in for a chance of those Highlanders, but they just seem to know how and when to put a game away, don't they?
Yeah. I will watch this one. I won't put boycott on. But, look, I just wish the Hurricanes weren't a patchy side either. Because they can pull off a good upset. And they did last year against the Hurricanes, the Crusaders. And boy, wasn't I happy. But, I've even got the cap on, Steve. Look, the Crusaders just know how to win. They're taught how to win. They'll expect nothing else other than silverware again this year, the way they're going. And double-digit margins for winning. So, it just comes down to the word you used a minute ago, professionalism. They're a very professional outfit. They know what to do. They're well trained and they have great depth. My concern for the Hurricanes is, you can't go for 60 minutes with the Crusaders. You've got to go for 80. And from what I saw against the Blues last week, the Hurricanes couldn't go for 80 with them. When you make a few mistakes, you get a bit tired, you try and run this play and that play, and I think sometimes Geordie does too much and sometimes Geordie does too little. On song, for a start, TJ's not there. Someone like him, young bloke, needs to take up the leadership. His brother's not there, as well. So it really does come down to backline against forwards. And Bob Dwyer, a former great Wallabies coach, the 91 Wallabies World Cup winning coach, said, if you've got forwards, good forwards lay a platform, it's going to help your backline and it's going to help with the tactics of the squad. So you just see that with the Crusaders. They've got good forwards, therefore they can use that mobility to get their backline going. And look, I think there's some really good forwards in that, big forwards in that Hurricane side. But if they muscle up, then their backline will perform as well. So I can't see anything other than the Crusaders win, but I'd like to see a really good game of footy.
Yeah, that forward pack is where this game's going to be decided. I think we're going to see something pretty similar to what we saw with the Highlanders. They just could not get any sort of momentum in that pack. Scrums fell apart. The lineouts, I think the Highlanders have a pretty decent lineout, but even they were a bit scratchy at times. It's mainly the scrums. It's mainly the breakdowns. That's where these games are really won and lost. And a good back row at the Hurricanes. And we don't have the teams yet, which is why I'm not going through them. It's because it's been moved to a Sunday game. They'll probably name them either later this evening on Friday night or tomorrow. On a Thursday night or tomorrow on Friday. So we're kind of guessing as what's going to go. But I think things will stay pretty similar. I think the Hurricanes have been pretty happy for, like you said, 50, 60 minutes of that game. They were in it with the Blues. They just completely went too attacking. It's that whole double-sided sword, isn't it? You go try and push to get back into that game. It kind of leaves you a bit open for something to spark back the other way, which, as we saw, happened with the Blues. But it's tough. It really is tough. If you can't get that forward pack dominance against a team like the Crusaders, they are just going to run all over you, and they know how to time their performances and time their play really, really well, and they are going to be one tough team to beat. Pick-wise, Shane, who have you gone and how much for on this one?
Crusaders by 15.
15. Whew, I've gone pretty similar, actually, just checking my picks as well. I've gone Crusaders by 10. I would like it to be really close. And I do hope we do get the clearance to move things back to normal and we go back to having a good old crowd on this game as well. So hopefully we do get that. But Hurricanes up against it. I think the whole New Zealand conference is up against it. The Blues weren't convincing enough for me that they're going to really challenge the Crusaders the way they played against the Hurricanes. Either too, like I said, too patchy, too hot and cold. And if they don't perform at that top level for the whole game, the Crusaders just don't often have off nights. And now they're going to have an off night this season. Who knows? We'll see how the competition pans out. We're both going Crusaders. I think, do we agree about the whole thing except for the opening game where the boys, the Highlanders, are going to obviously pick up the upset win over the Chiefs, Shane? You're going to get that wrong straight away. But that is it. A little bit of a quick look at the 4 games for this weekend. Of course, there's no Blues and there's no Reds, so the colours are completely out of it for this weekend's action of the competition. We'll wrap things up, Shane. Any final thoughts on Super Rugby, past, present, in the future, heading into this weekend, before we wrap up?
No, just fire up your barbecues. It's going to be great.
Yeah, and go follow Shane on Twitter because he put on his barbecue recipe last weekend. It was the second Australian matchup, wasn't it? It was a cracker. So yeah, a lot of people got in behind that too, which is good to see. So we want to see some barbecues going out there. Get the barbecues rocking up for this weekend's Super Rugby action. But that is it from us. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks everyone for commenting, having your say, and of course coming by and tuning in. And we will see you next week, Thursday, around about 5 o'clock-ish New Zealand time or 3 o'clock-ish Australian time. We'll be here bringing you our thoughts on the 4 games coming your way. Until then, though, thank you always for coming by, and we'll see you then. Take care.